was the first week of December, and the streets of Willow Grove sparkled with holiday cheer. Homes were adorned with shimmering lights, inflatable snowmen, and festive wreaths on every door. For years, the neighborhood had prided itself on being a winter wonderland, where families gathered to admire the decorations and children played under the glow of the twinkling lights. But this year, the spirit of the season was under attack. Ellen Parker, a new resident with a reputation for being difficult, had filed a formal complaint with the Homeowners Association. She argued that the decorations were an eyesore and disturbing the peace with their bright lights and occasional music. To everyone's shock, Ellen proposed a ban on all outdoor holiday displays, leaving the neighborhood divided and unsure of how to respond. Among the residents was Margaret Maggie Thompson, a feisty grandmother in her late 70s. Maggie had lived in Willow Grove for over 3 decades and was known for her wit, wisdom, and a mischievous streak that had earned her the affection of the community. Every year, Maggie transformed her small bungalow into a Christmas haven, complete with an elaborate light show synced to carols, a handcrafted nativity scene, and a towering Christmas tree visible from the street. When Maggie learned about Ellen's complaint, she was furious. To her, holiday decorations were more than just ornaments. They symbolized togetherness, joy, and tradition. Determined to preserve the spirit of the season, Maggie decided to take matters into her own hands. Maggie began by rallying her neighbors, urging them not to let one person ruin what had been a cherished tradition for years. But Ellen was relentless, pushing the Homeowners Association to schedule a vote on the proposed ban. With only a week to prepare, Maggie knew she had to act fast. She dove into her attic and pulled out her old sewing machine, boxes of fabric, and every Christmas light she could find. That evening, as the neighborhood debated whether to comply with Ellen's demands or resist, Maggie stayed up late, crafting a plan that was equal parts clever and festive. By the time dawn broke, Maggie's house was the talk of the street, not because of the decorations she had taken down, but because of the ingenious display she had put up. Maggie had replaced her usual lights and ornaments with a series of banners, each bearing a cheerful message like, "Love thy neighbor," "Holiday spirit lives here," and "Joy to the world." She carefully arranged them in her yard, ensuring they stayed within the guidelines of the neighborhood rules, while making it impossible for anyone to miss the message. The banners, illuminated by soft, warm lights, attracted attention from passers-by, and soon the entire neighborhood was buzzing with excitement. Maggie's creativity inspired other residents, who began brainstorming ways to express their holiday cheer without breaking the proposed rules. By the time Ellen walked past Maggie's house that morning, she found herself face to face with a crowd of neighbors, all smiling and united in their defiance. Ellen stood in stunned silence as she surveyed the scene before her. Maggie's house was a glowing beacon of defiance, and the neighbors surrounding her were equally determined not to let their holiday traditions be erased. Ellen's frustration bubbled to the surface, and she declared loudly that the banners were a loophole, but still went against the spirit of her complaint. Her words, however, only seemed to embolden the crowd. Maggie, with her usual charm and calm demeanor, stepped forward and said, "Ellen, Christmas is about more than lights and decorations. It's about bringing people together, even those who might not agree. Why don't you join us and experience the joy for yourself?" Ellen scoffed and stormed off, but Maggie's words planted a seed of doubt in her mind. The next day, the tension in the neighborhood grew as the date for the Homeowners Association vote approached. Ellen doubled down on her efforts to persuade the board, sending emails and distributing flyers about the excessive decorations. But Maggie had already rallied her allies. Families began putting up their own creative displays, inspired by Maggie's banners. Some used projectors to cast colorful images on their houses, while others created handmade signs with messages of goodwill. The street transformed into an even more vibrant celebration of the season, and soon, local news outlets caught wind of the story. A reporter arrived to interview Maggie, who explained the importance of preserving holiday traditions and how the decorations had always brought people together. Her interview aired that evening, turning the neighborhood into a symbol of resilience and community spirit. Meanwhile, Ellen found herself increasingly isolated. Though a few residents sympathized with her argument about bright lights disrupting sleep, most were won over by Maggie's heartfelt campaign. Ellen began receiving emails and calls from strangers who had seen the news, urging her to reconsider her stance. Some messages were harsh, accusing her of being a Grinch, while others were kinder, asking her to think about the joy her neighbors felt during the holidays. The attention was overwhelming, and for the first time, Ellen questioned whether her crusade against the decorations was worth the animosity it had created. But her pride wouldn't let her back down completely, and she resolved to attend the upcoming vote with her head held high. On the evening of the vote, the community center was packed with residents. Maggie arrived early, dressed in her signature Christmas sweater adorned with tiny blinking lights, and took a seat near the front. Ellen entered a few minutes later, her usual confident stride replaced by a more hesitant gait. As the meeting began, the board members allowed both sides to present their arguments. Maggie spoke eloquently about the importance of tradition and community, sharing stories of how the decorations had brought neighbors closer over the years. Ellen, in contrast, stumbled through her speech, clearly unnerved by the sheer number of people who had come out to oppose her proposal. When the time came for the vote, the results were clear. The community overwhelmingly rejected the ban, solidifying their commitment to preserving their holiday traditions. After the vote, the atmosphere in the community shifted dramatically. People cheered and clapped, their voices echoing through the community center like a victory bell. Maggie smiled warmly, shaking hands and exchanging hugs with neighbors who thanked her for standing up for their shared traditions. But amidst the celebration, Ellen sat quietly in a corner, her face flushed and her hands clasped tightly on her lap. She felt defeated, not just by the vote, but by the realization that her efforts to impose her views had alienated her from the community. Maggie noticed Ellen sitting alone, and despite the evening's triumph, felt a pang of compassion. She walked over, her Christmas sweater still twinkling, and sat beside her. "Ellen, I know this hasn't been easy for you," she began gently. "But this can still be a fresh start. The vote is over, but we'd love for you to join us in the festivities." Ellen looked at Maggie with a mixture of surprise and skepticism. She had expected smugness or gloating, not an invitation to reconcile. "Why would you want me there?" Ellen asked, her voice tinged with bitterness. Maggie chuckled softly. "Because Christmas is about forgiveness and second chances," she replied. "I've always believed that no one is beyond redemption, Ellen. We may not see eye to eye, but you're still part of this community, and it wouldn't feel complete without you." For a moment, Ellen said nothing, her mind racing through the events of the past few weeks. She thought about the loneliness she'd felt since the decorations went up and the warmth and camaraderie she had seen among her neighbors. Slowly, she nodded. "I'll think about it," she said quietly. It wasn't a promise, but it was a start. The next day, Maggie decided to extend an olive branch in a more personal way. She baked a batch of her famous gingerbread cookies, wrapped them in a festive tin, and left them on Ellen's doorstep with a handwritten note that read, "Ellen, these cookies are a family tradition, just like our decorations. I hope they bring a little cheer to your day. Warm wishes." Maggie Ellen found the tin later that afternoon and hesitated before bringing it inside. She opened the note first, reading Maggie's words over and over again. For the first time in weeks, Ellen felt a flicker of warmth in her chest. She tried one of the cookies and couldn't help but smile at how delicious it was. It reminded her of Christmases from her childhood, back when she and her siblings would gather around the tree to share stories and laugh together. The memory brought a lump to her throat. Later that evening, Ellen stepped outside and was greeted by a scene of pure magic. The street was alive with twinkling lights, laughter, and the sound of carolers singing classic holiday tunes. Families had gathered on their front lawns to sip hot cocoa and admire each other's displays. For the first time, Ellen didn't feel anger or resentment. Instead, she felt a longing to be part of the joy she saw around her. She walked over to Maggie's house where a small group of neighbors had gathered to admire her banner of handwritten wishes. Maggie spotted Ellen approaching and immediately walked over, a hopeful smile on her face. "Ellen, I'm so glad you came," she said warmly. Ellen hesitated, then extended her hand. "I'm not sure where to start," she admitted. Maggie took her hand and said, "You just did." The days following Ellen's decision to join the community's Christmas celebration were filled with small moments of transformation. Ellen began to spend more time outdoors, helping her neighbors decorate their homes, and in the process, her attitude slowly began to shift. Maggie invited her to help decorate the community center, and at first, Ellen felt out of place, unsure of how to contribute. But as Maggie handed her a strand of twinkling lights, she found herself laughing at the shared experience of tangled wires and mixed-up bulbs. That day, Ellen realized something that had been eluding her for weeks. She missed the connection with her neighbors. She had been so focused on her own beliefs that she had forgotten what it felt like to be part of something larger, something unifying. Ellen's transformation didn't go unnoticed. Her neighbors were quick to express their gratitude for her change of heart. Many came over to her house to invite her to holiday events and to show their support. A few even brought her homemade treats and small gifts. One morning, a neighbor named Sarah brought over a small poinsettia plant for her front porch. "It's from everyone," Sarah said. "Just a little gift to show we appreciate you being part of this again." Ellen stood there for a moment, holding the delicate plant in her hands, feeling an overwhelming sense of belonging she hadn't felt in years. The tension that had once existed between her and her neighbors was beginning to dissolve, replaced by understanding and kindness. It was as if the Christmas spirit had worked its magic on her, softening her heart. As the weeks passed, the neighborhood was filled with the kind of camaraderie that Maggie had hoped for all along. The holiday decorations continued to light up the street every evening, and people gathered at the community center for events, potlucks, and holiday parties. Ellen, once so resistant to the festive spirit, was now actively participating in the joy of it all. She helped organize a Christmas Eve caroling event, something that had become a tradition in the neighborhood. On the night of the event, as the group of carolers made their way through the streets, Ellen found herself singing along with her neighbors, laughing and sharing the warmth that came with being part of something bigger than herself. That evening, as the last notes of Silent Night filled the air, Ellen turned to Maggie and said, "I didn't think I'd ever be here, singing carols and helping with decorations, but I'm glad I was wrong." Maggie smiled and wrapped an arm around her shoulders. "You're not the first person to be wrong about something," she said gently. "Sometimes it takes a little time, a little understanding, and a little love to see things from a different perspective." Ellen nodded, her heart full of gratitude for the unexpected journey she had taken. It had been a journey that had not only changed her, but it also brought the entire neighborhood closer together. In the end, Maggie's thoughtful and clever approach to handling the situation with Ellen proved to be successful. By focusing on her kindness, showing understanding, and even offering a solution, Maggie not only saved her beloved holiday tradition, but also made a new friend in the process. Ellen, seeing how the decorations had united the neighborhood and brought warmth to her own heart, had a change of perspective. The tension that had existed between the two women melted away as they shared a new sense of respect for one another. Maggie didn't just win the fight over the decorations. She brought the community closer together, proving that kindness and empathy could break down even the toughest barriers. To all our viewers, remember that kindness and patience can make all the difference, especially when you face challenges. Sometimes, it's not about winning an argument, but about understanding others' perspectives and finding a common ground. Like Maggie, you can spread warmth and joy in the most unexpected ways. Thank you for watching, and may you always find ways to turn a tough situation into something beautiful.